Je pense sans cesse à toi.
Hello and welcome to episode 52 of The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. I'm really looking forward to today's show, which will be all about making the world a healthier place for everyone. We will start out today by talking about a new concept for a grocery store that aims to nourish underserved communities with farm fresh foods as well as education. Next, we will take a fresh look at food waste. And finally, did you know that there's an organic reformation underway? Here in the studios of OPB, I am joined by Fernando Divina, Vice President of Operations for Basics Market and Creative Director and Executive Chef for Keystone Pacific LLC. Welcome, Fernando.
Good afternoon.
And Jill Lightner, author of the new book, Scraps, Peels, and Stems, Recipes and Tips for Rethinking Food Waste. Thank you for being here, Jill.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for having me.
And we're very lucky to have Amanda Oborne returning. She's the Vice President of Food and Farms at EcoTrust. Hi, Amanda.
Hey there.
Well, folks, I think it's time for our first course. We're going to talk about nourishment from the ground up. Fernando Divina, you are part of a team launching a new style of grocery store called Basics Market that aims to deliver nourishment from the ground up. I'm intrigued by this phrase and also the goal that Basics Market has of educating underserved communities about health. Can you just tell us more about this concept?
Sure. We're a vertical organization that has ag and food production and markets at this juncture, and our aim is to provide access to local high quality foods in their most in their freshest form, and we're targeting folks in the community, in the health community here in Portland. And we're working immediately with the Portland Clinic.
The Portland Clinic being?
The Portland Clinic is a healthcare organization that is located within our building, and they share the concepts of good health through nourishing food. As we do.
So you're talking about, it's a grocery store concept, but you said it also involves agriculture. So you're talking about a grocery store that's a farm, and it's also connected to a healthcare clinic. I don't think I've ever heard of anything like that.
Yeah, it seems like it's a logical move for us. I formerly worked with the Oregon Health and Science University, and the entire healthcare industry is aiming toward preventive health care, and it starts with good nutrition. And for us, in particular here in Oregon, with the Eggert family, we want to make that accessible to everyone and as many people as we can. And we believe that the choice is being narrowed so that it's only representative of what's freshest and what is immediately available. Most of the farms that we are associated with are within just minutes of the store, literally predominantly in the Willamette Valley area here. But we just want to make it available and accessible. And so we offer both organic and non-organic products.
And the Eggert family, the family that founded Pacific Foods, but I think most people don't know that they have their own farm, and don't they actually supply Pacific Foods with raw materials as well, or
we do.
Get us all up to date on that.
The Eggert family farms consists of feed crops to provide for the livestock that we have, and we raise chicken and duck and turkeys. We raise dairy cattle and beef for meat. So we have. We also grow and produce our own feed and fuel, and the fuel is to power our plants that produce many of the foods. So we're producing cheese and ice cream. We'll be producing other food products. We are working on a line of prepared foods like marinara sauce and tomato sauce, a family of tomato products, and others. So we're fully integrated, and that's our aim, is to have produce as much as we can. In that effort, we're recruiting and expanding an already substantial farm concern. We've expanded into Cloverdale Farms over in Pacific City, for example, and the aim there is to provide jobs for the people in that community and to also allow for the provenance to be brought forward. In other words, we'll present foods from Cloverdale under that banner so that they can be recognized and it can help fuel the community, both with respect to work and also contributing to the food stream here. One of our main objectives is to provide access to everyone, and that is not just in the way of value foods and the food at the market, but also the means for a life way that's surrounded by food.
Wow.
Can I ask what might be a dopey question, Fernando? Are you already set up to take EBT food stamps? Will you be? Are you set up for WIC? Do those strictures, because I know that WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children's,
yes,
I know that they have really pretty strict regulations kind of around what's accepted in that program and what's not. Anyway.
Well, we have one of our points of origin. We're working with Fabian School, and the program there is principally to provide food for folks that are challenged for food, and we do have a WIC program, and EBT is available there. Some of the requirements for WIC and EBT we may not be able to fulfill initially. Our ultimate goal is to serve the community on a very broad level and to be able to do so with both of those programs. We just haven't figured out how to do it in this small footprint.
But I would think that since you're cutting out so many steps in the food supply chain, that prices might be a little better in general?
That's exactly the goal. We principally gain ground in distribution. We're self-distributed.
Awesome.
Amanda Oborne, you study food systems, you study food, and enlighten us all. Have you heard of a model like this before? Is this a novel concept?
Yeah, it's definitely a novel concept. I love the way I've known Fernando for a long time. We've been working in farm-to-institution work back when he was at OHSU. And so we've long wrestled with this issue of how to make good, healthy, nutrient-dense food affordable to a really broad range of people, not just the ones that might be shopping at high-end grocery retailers. So I really appreciate that this new concept tackles affordability head-on, but does it in a way that's environmentally restorative with the local farms and sort of takes the whole picture into account for our region.
You know, it's interesting. I want to get back to the health side of it, the fact that you have this relationship with a health clinic, and also I would love to talk a little bit more about the educational aspect. There was an interesting study from the National Bureau of Economic Research that came out in January that pointed out that food deserts by themselves are not so much of a problem. I mean, obviously, food deserts are a problem, and we all know food deserts are areas where people don't have access to fresh, healthy food, but sort of a problem that hasn't been explored enough is just the lack of education about nutrition. And so, Fernando, it sounds like that side of this concept is pretty novel, that you're addressing that, the education part.
It's a big part of what we're doing, Catherine. We're devoting about a third of our footprint to classroom and educational efforts, endeavors, and we have a nutritionist and dietitian on staff. We have 4 actually that are available, generally speaking, all hours of operation. We have what we're calling culinary mentors that are available to provide guidance if you're inspired by the dishes you see. We have meal stations, which is a unique component there's recipes that we've developed that have been vetted by our nutritionists that are both delicious and nutritious, and so this ties in with allowing accessibility to the community on a free level. All of our classes are free at the moment, and we hope everyone will take advantage of that. And the design is really there for those that want to simply come in and shop and get the freshest ingredients and take advantage of our pricing, or if they want health information or guidance, we can provide that as well, whether it's dietary restrictions or they're looking for a healthier life way. And then if they are motivated to cook, we can help them achieve. Principally, our motivation is to illustrate to them how it is that they might buy foods in their most pure form, whole form, and then create several meals from those, like a whole chicken that's roasted one day. Next day, some of the picked meat is used in a salad, for example, and then the bones are made into stock. So it's all available, and it's all dependent upon your desire as a shopper.
Well, Fernando, you just gave me the perfect transition to our second course. Jill Lightner would probably be a great person to have on hand to educate your
totally
perked
up with the one ingredient, 3 ways, I'm all over it.
Our second course is a new look at food waste, picking up on the theme that Fernando was just touching upon. Jill, we actually discussed food waste at the macro level on the very first episode of this podcast, but I am really intrigued by your new book, Scraps, Peels, and Stems, Recipes and Tips for Rethinking Food Waste, because it brings it down to the micro level inside our households. How can we whittle down our grocery bills, eat well, and make our trash bins that much less full?
Oh my gosh, it's very satisfying to have a really tiny little bit of waste every week. Just like, I am so efficient, except that one time after the picnic. Anyway, so the using one ingredient in multiple ways and getting as many meals as possible out of it is kind of the fun and potentially really creative way of dealing with food waste and reducing food waste. You have to, like you were saying, Fernando, get a sense of all of the possibilities there. People don't necessarily know off the top of your head that a rotisserie chicken that maybe you buy in the grocery store can then be turned into a picnic, and then you can take all the skin and the bones and all those little bits home and make a really great soup out of it later. So that is actually true with so many things that I buy on a regular basis. I buy a can of tomatoes because I live in Seattle and tomato season is like 3 days long and I probably already missed it. So I buy canned tomatoes and I drain out the juice that they're packed in. And it's so good, whether it's in a Bloody Mary mix or whether I'm adding it to chili. The same is true with canned beans. I don't know if y'all have heard of aquafaba.
Yes.
It's the fancy Italian name for bean water. Ooh, sounds so good in Italian, doesn't it? And you can whip it up and you turn it into an egg substitute.
I'll just say you had me at Bloody Mary. We go back to that one.
Let's go back to the Bloody Mary. You can make aquafaba waffles to have with your Bloody Mary. How about that?
Delicious.
Another thing that I love to do, especially since football season is coming up, and shrimp platters are put out at a lot of the games I go to, and so you pick off those shells and you save them, and then you can make shrimp shell stock out of them, which is amazing for gumbo down the road.
Yeah.
You can also do that with fresh ingredients. One of the recipes in the book, along with shrimp shell stock, is roasted cauliflower leaves. So you buy the whole head of cauliflower, and you might break that down into cutting the florets off the very end, roast those into a yummy salad or side dish, take the big, bulky stems of it, turn that into a soup, and then take those leaves and roast them on high heat and drizzle a little vinegar on them. And they're when I made that for the photo shoot for the book, the photographer just disappeared them in 2 minutes flat. She just ate the whole pan. I was like, did you get all the photos you needed? What are you doing? Because they're that good.
This is so interesting, Jill, because I feel like growing up, I don't know where I got this idea that the center of a vegetable is bitter or sour. You cut the center of the onion out or the center of the cauliflower out because that's not delicious. But what you're saying is it can be delicious.
It can totally be delicious. I mean, when I grew up, most of the vegetables that I had were microwaved out of the freezer, like not dressed, pretty simple, right? And so I thought I didn't
you mean bland.
or just like salty, and then like we stopped using salt, and so then it was bland, right, and kind of mushy. And I'm actually a fan of a lot of frozen vegetables, but so many vegetables, it's just that knowing how to cook with them. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I do with food scraps, if maybe they're not edible, like, you buy a whole head of garlic and you use most of it, but then maybe it gets really hot or you forget about the end of it, and so then they start sprouting. So I've started planting them. And it turns out, like, first of all, not only do they grow into a whole new head of garlic in about 4 months, which is super cool, but my neighborhood food bank has an ongoing need for fresh garlic because every cuisine uses fresh garlic. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to get donated very often. So I now have a little food bank garlic garden.
That is
pretty
fantastic.
Cool. From something that I would have formerly composted. Because who wants to cook with sprouted garlic?
At Basics, one of the goals for us is to use the plant in all its forms. So as a seed, we'll use it and grind it into flour. As a sprout, we'll use it in salads. As a podder, we'll use it to wilt, for example. And then as a mature plant, we'll eat it in that form too. So those are great opportunities that oftentimes are overlooked.
I think some ways kind of that sort of lovely Alice Waters, like let's reclaim beautiful vegetables, thinking from Chez Panisse and California cuisine in the 70s. I think in some ways that we kind of lost something in grabbing onto that idea. There's a difference between the perfect $5 Rainier cherry and the bag of frozen vegetables that were microwaved and served to me unseasoned. There's so many other kinds of produce that are out there that you can do just wonderful things with, and it just takes a little bit of kind of rethinking.
Speaking of produce being beautiful, I have seen these trucks, these imperfect produce trucks around. Can you tell me what's going on with that? We did do a segment, I think, on the fact that we need to embrace ugly fruits and vegetables.
Right. I would say that there's really strong pros and there's a potential downside to imperfect produce, so the upside is that imperfect produce, because grocery stores have ones that buy stuff rather than grow it all themselves, Fernando, they have very strict policies about how big or how little or how funny looking something can be. Sometimes it can just be like, oh, this is supposed to be a red pear, but it has a little green stripe on it, so it's imperfect, which means that it has $0 value to the farmer. So some of that from the farms would get donated into the food pantry system of the U.S., and that's a wonderful thing, and it's a tax write-off for the farmer to at least some degree. But at the same time, farmers they need every revenue source they can get. Even the big factory farms that we hear about don't necessarily have a great profit margin. Like the food business just doesn't. So imperfect produce says we're going to buy up the stuff that you can't sell through the normal grocery channel.
And this is a company, we should say.
Imperfect Produce is a California-based company started by a guy, I think, who moved out here from... I think he maybe started it in college, if I remember right. Ben Simon is the CEO. And he's a young guy. So it's getting a lot of attention and venture capital investment. And those things come at a price. And in this case, the price seems to be that there is potentially less fresh produce that will end up in the food pantry system.
Oh.
There's also direct competition with some CSA programs and some community-based sort of low-cost feeding programs. There's actually just in the last day or two, the Beat
which
Box
is based
story
in the
that's
same
come out.
city as Imperfect Produce. So Beatbox CSA
in Oakland.
Yeah,
and the Beatbox is losing produce because imperfect produce.
They have actually lost a tremendous market share because their customers have switched from having that I don't remember. They shared, there was an article that was going around, and they shared the number of customers that they had lost, but it was really substantial. Wow. And they're a nonprofit, so the CSA helps fund really cool food education and access programs. So the fact that they're directly impacted is lousy. I know that Imperfect Produce is doing great business-wise in Seattle, and I have not heard those kinds of complaints from Seattle CSAs yet. Whether it will happen next spring is a different story.
Jill, there are programs sprouting about that are foraging programs. There's a couple here in Portland where they contact homeowners associations, and they'll come and harvest the surplus fruit that's. I live in an old orchard, and all the ornamental trees around us are fully producing fruit trees, so there's a surplus, and that's an opportunity that I think that has a lot of can gain ground. Amanda, are you associated with?
I was just thinking you're really lucky. I want to come hang out in your yard where the trees are bearing fruit.
Which fruit trees precisely do you have in your yard? Have we missed this season?
Gravenstein, actually.
Oh, hello.
Translucent Gravensteins.
I do think Imperfect Produce is both the name of a company and sort of a class of innovation or thinking that is tied to the reduction of waste in the food stream more broadly. So there's sort of a general move toward being less picky about our perfect, cosmetically perfect, unblemished produce when it probably tastes exactly the same, does taste exactly the same as the stuff that's a little funky shaped, and developing an appreciation for the misfits of the vegetable world and inviting into their home and making soup or stock or spaghetti with them.
There's so many companies that are starting to get in on that. PCC, which is the big food co-op where I live in the Seattle area, they work with an Oregon apple growing company, or it's an organically grown company, and they package up these. They're called lunchbox size apples, which is a very cute name for kind of a dinky little apple that is like, it's the perfect lunchbox sized apple if you're sending an apple to school with your kid. It's hard to sell those out of a bag, and so they bag them up, and then a percentage of the sales of those then goes to food education programs, like both in Washington and in Oregon. So there's a lot of really cool programs that you can find that get at that root of let's help reduce food waste before the food ever enters into our kitchen, whether you're buying from a CSA or a bag of apples that are just a little dinky. Anyway, it's really cool to see. Like there's even, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a bag that's like, these are the ugly potatoes, and we're going to bag them up, and there's a 5-pound bag of, if you really care whether your potato is ugly. I've never thought about it. Right, exactly. It's a potato. It's not going to win any beauty contests.
Well, and I'm sorry, Jill, I got us way off track. I want to hear more about your book. One thing I've been thinking about lately is there was that whole nose to tail movement with meat. I want to say like a decade ago, and it's interesting.
Root to stem with vegetables.
It's interesting that root to stem is kind of a more recent movement, isn't it?
It took us a while, and again, I think it's tied into that. While the big name chefs were getting really excited about those funny little funky cuts of meat, and even then, there's ingredients like pork lard or suet, which is beef fat. I guess it can also be sheep fat, but I don't think that is much of a thing in the U.S. Anyway, nose to tail always kind of had its limitations, really, for the most part. There's just not that many suet puddings or beef fat fries that are really around, and there is trying to be more of a movement to bring that in. But the vegetables, along with your weird, funny cut of meat that you might not have ever heard of, you still had to have these pristine, perfect little baby carrots, roasted whole with just the right amount of frond still attached. Mm-hmm. And I think that is some of what we're seeing finally. Like, chefs love playing around with cool ingredients, and perfect little baby carrots get weird and boring, right? So they're going to go in for cauliflower leaves. Maybe that'll be the next big thing.
Yeah, I think I read there's a restaurant chain in the Netherlands that only serves food waste, or what would technically be classified as food waste. I love that this is a movement.
That's awesome.
Well, I think it might be time for our third course, the Organic Reformation. Amanda Oborne, you wrote a fascinating blog post for EcoTrust earlier this year about what you called an organic reformation. Can you tell us about the new movement toward regenerative agriculture and this concept that farming could actually mitigate or even reverse climate change rather than worsening it? I'm so excited about this.
And that's organic reformation ? I think this is very much still a live conversation and very much in progress.
But I like it because it's catchy.
All right, we're in. The heart of the question is really about the types of agriculture that both feed us. I mean, this conversation about food waste is actually a really, really important one in lots of ways. So how does our agriculture feed us, but then also restore the soil and water resources on which the whole kitchen caboodle is entirely dependent? And advocates have long been in the camp of certified organic, so get the pesticides out of the system. The idea behind that, I think at its very root, has always been about restoring soil, but also restoring the humans that are working in the soil and then eating the fruits of the soil. And what I've seen evolve and emerge over the last couple of years is another take on soil health and soil stewardship, which isn't specific to the pesticide question, which of course is still a really, really important one, but more about the soil itself and how do you keep that really, really healthy. And the distinction there, which is going to sound like splitting hairs probably to people who don't think about dirt all day long, is that regenerative agriculture basically means no-till and cover cropping, which means instead of pulling stuff out of the ground every season, meaning after you harvest whatever it is you're harvesting, the core product you're harvesting, then whatever remains usually gets tilled up. You do this in your home garden probably as well every spring, is till it all up and plant the new seeds and have sort of a...
You don't know how lazy a gardener I am.
It sounds like you're a regenerative agriculturist.
Look at me.
Which basically means you don't pull all of that stuff up.
Laziness for the win.
Lazy for the win, because what that does when you leave it all there is all of the goodness that has been growing underground. There is as much growing underground as there is above ground in your garden or in large-scale agriculture. And you want all of that stuff in the ground. You want the soil structure and the microbes and the mycorrhizae and all the sort of little bugs and germs and bacteria and all the good stuff that happens underground to stay there instead of ripping it up every year.
So I have a question that it relates to a Northwest brand of flour that I've bought for a long time now, Shepherd's Grain, and they've been promoting no-till agriculture for a long time, but it's not, at least the bags of flour that I buy most commonly are not certified organic at all. I think maybe some of the farmers in their co-op are organic. Does no-till have benefit if you're not organic?
Yes. So this is why the question of organic versus no-till has been kind of a raucous one over the last couple of years, because no-till and organic are different things. No-till just means you don't rip the ground up every year and start fresh. But it does mean that there can still be herbicide applied in certain cases where you have to get rid of that stubble. So a lot of the Shepherd's Grain farmers who are real innovators and pioneers in this, in the regenerative agriculture world, some of them still use some herbicide. So they're not, they would never be organic certified in all likelihood. And there are some farmers who would refuse to ever do regenerative agriculture if herbicide is still required. So there's been this sort of, debate, a face-off, a battle of wills, a philosophical differences, all of those things. And obviously, in the very most ideal world, we would have a way to deal with either the stubble, the stuff that remains after harvest, in an organic certified manner.
That's what goats are for.
Yeah, exactly. If you're on several thousand wheat acres, though, the goats
a lot of goats.
Yeah, that's a lot of goats.
Amanda, is it dependent upon those growing on the west side now, which is becoming popular, or their proximity, or on the east side, whether or not they are inclined to use chemical in the no-till?
Yeah, so Fernando's asking about west side of the Pacific Northwest, meaning west side of the Cascade Mountains, so kind of up and down the I-5 corridor between Portland and Seattle, and sort of that coastal, the mountain range to the coast versus the east side of the two states, which is much, 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 much drier. And most large-scale wheat production is on the east side. But over the last few years, there's been a lot of evolution and innovation in organic wheat growing and organic grains on the west side, the wet side. And whether either side can use herbicide or pesticide if they, obviously not in a certified organic model, but I think it's not dependent necessarily on where they're located. It's more the sort of philosophy that they're bringing to their production. And so there's this really interesting debate happening right now between the two and what it means to actually care about going back to the roots of soil health. So organic, last winter, folks were up in arms because you can now have organic certified a hydroponic production. So there's no soil involved at all. It's a water-based system, which some people are really excited about because it expands the market in the ways that you can grow organically. And other people are furious about because the whole point was about soil health in the first place. So if you don't even have soil in the system, what are you doing? And what's the nutrition content of those veggies and that kind of stuff. So makes for interesting, for those of us that geek out on this stuff, it makes for fascinating, front row seats.
I feel like I could ask you a million questions. One is, I have a faint recollection. Is it true that when you turn the soil over, you're actually releasing carbon into the environment?
You are.
So that's interesting.
That's why no-till is such an interesting. So in climate circles, when people are talking about climate change and the existential threat that we face, I don't think most people realize that industrial agriculture actually rivals fossil fuels in terms of the release of carbon and greenhouse gases because of the way we do it, and particularly in livestock. So growing feed and forage, using fertilizers to grow that feed, and raising animals in confined animal feeding operations or feedlots all intensifies the way we use those resources such that carbon is released and gases are released, and it's actually as bad as a coal plant if you add up the totals. So it's incredibly important for those paying attention to the climate crisis and ensuring that we continue as people on the planet, that we deal with how we do agriculture.
What would you say about low-till, where
I've seen that label
there's
before.
Planting or drills for seeds being used, so it's sort of a hybrid, and where they're not really tilling, they might disc, and it just depends on their topography from crop to crop and year to year, but there's some that say that there's an economical benefit also to no-till in more ways than one. Can you speak to those two elements, what low-till is versus no-till, and if there is potential economic benefit?
Yeah, for sure. The reality is we could get very deep in the weeds on all of these
to make
questions.
A pun. But no roundup.
That's what you're supposed to do on podcasts, right? But from my perspective, all the innovation is awesome. Like the fact that people at every scale of operation and every type of philosophical origin are thinking about how to do agriculture in a way that benefits their soil health and their long-term, longevity on their land, and makes really good use of water. I mean, we've seen their summer's been so intensely hot and dry. We know we're going to have a water situation. So all of the innovation, I think, is really, really awesome. There is a financial benefit if you go no-till or low-till, just in terms of you're not paying for as many fertilizers and pesticides and all of that kind of stuff to maintain. The sort of gold standard is if you're doing no-till and cover cropping and integrating livestock in rotation. So if you partner with the rancher next door and have that rancher run his cows over your field when they're fallow or off season, you would be amazed at how well your next crop goes because you have a very natural form of compost going onto the land and being spread without the heavy impact of equipment that's going to impact this compact the soil. So
you're not paying for gas for
absolutely, there's all kinds of upside. But it's really interesting that farmers and ranchers have never partnered in those ways in the past. There's food safety concerns and there's all kinds of complications to be addressed, but it's happening in Eastern Oregon. I've walked fields where farmers and ranchers have collaborated on building soil health, and both have benefited both financially and in terms of product quality in everything that utilize those fields, both the crops and the animals.
There's a concern that does that, and the Eggert family employs that system. We haven't moved yet to no-till, but we do rotate our crops with our livestock, and it's a form of that, and the notion is to try to do all that you can to keep the nutrients in the soil, and it's a process.
Sure is.
I'm so excited about this. Just the fact that there's movement. We're continuing the discussion about, well, maybe we don't even call it organic agriculture anymore. Sustainable agriculture. If people want to learn more, should they Google regenerative agriculture? Is that the right term?
Yeah, they can Google regenerative agriculture for sure. And there are two books that I would recommend. The first is called "The Soil Will Save Us" by Kristen Olson. She's actually a Portland-based author. That's a really, really accessible, concise book that's a really fun, great read. And the second one I'd recommend is called "Growing a Revolution" by David Montgomery, who's actually a University of Washington professor and also now on the EcoTrust board, who's written extensively from a scientific perspective about soil health and regeneration.
Great. Well, I could ask you questions all day, but sadly we have to move on to our dessert course, in which we each share something foodie or drinky that we've been enjoying this week. I will go first. I tried to decide what I'm going to share. I think what I'm going to say is, if anyone is interested in the wine aspect of this conversation, check out, just Google the name Mimi Castile. She is a farmer here in Oregon who is practicing and preaching no-till. And it's always fun to approach agriculture from the wine direction, because people really geek out because they feel they're so tied up in the quality of what they're drinking that they really geek out about the agriculture to kind of a sort of a frightening level. But just Google Mimi Castile. She's kind of the evangelist for no-till in Oregon and I think the country. Fernando, did you bring a dessert item for us to enjoy this week?
Well, it's right now, just this week, my Wapato, I have a test Wapato crop here and there about the area. And
what's
so
Wapato?
Wapato is also arrowhead or Sagittarius latifolia. And it's been around. It's like the original.
Do you understand what it is now, Catherine?
No, I think I just glazed over. Sorry, what is
it
that?
Looks like it's a beautiful plant. It's a beautiful food plant that's been that was predominant all over the planet, but principally in the northern climes and here in North America before farming and before the occupancy and farming took hold. And right now, with these efforts for soil amendment and soil restoration, we have a program that we're launching, and so we're doing riparian restoration, and part of that is with Wapato, and we hope to bring Wapato back as a food item at the farmers markets, and sort of help bridge those areas that are typically neglected.
Wonderful. I'm going to start looking for that. Thank you. Jill, did you bring a dessert item for us?
I did. It's probably, given that I had a cinnamon roll for breakfast and a pastry for lunch, it's good that my theoretical dessert is a chickpea. This is a chickpea variety that is only new to me. It's an ancient variety. Sometimes it's called, I think, kalachana. They're black chickpeas. and they're a little bit smaller than the normal dried chickpea or garbanzo that you might find in a bag or find in the bulk department. They're small and they're really dark and they have this wonderful nutty flavor. I cooked up a big pot of them in my Instapot yesterday now that it's not 90 degrees at home anymore. Yay! And I'm going to be mucking about trying to come up with some tweaks on chana masala and maybe try these new chickpeas and hummus too, because I bet it would be a beautiful, like a really, it's not that pasty beige of normal hummus. It's going to be this really nice, like acorn brown color.
Ooh.
And I just got mine. They were a Bob's Red Mill. I haven't looked into where else to get them, but I'm sure that they're available online if you can't find them in your neighborhood.
Oh, wonderful. Put some of those in my Instant Pot. I can't wait.
Yeah, exactly. Soak them.
Yeah.
They won't cook right. Pre-soak.
Well, that's the Instant Pot. You don't have to do any of it.
I do, actually, with beans. Yeah,
Oh, really?
I really have to pre-soak or they never end up cooked properly.
Oh.
You'll have to stop by Basics and we can show you a couple of different alternatives.
Exactly. Amanda, did you bring a dessert item for us?
Yeah, my dessert item is a main course, which is buffalo.
Oh.
We are headed right into fall, which is when most of the local ranchers who sell directly to eaters are harvesting animals this fall and taking orders for quarter and half animals. So it's time to
Wait, how big is a half buffalo?
It's really big. But you can fit it in about 2 milk crates when it's all cut down and packaged. So make space in your freezer, do a search online for your local rancher, and this is the time to place orders for buffalo, for grass-finished beef, I'm picking up my salmon share today. This is the time to fill the freezer and get ready for winter and get all those really good cuts of local meat into the freezer and ready for those Instapots. But the good news is about buffalo in particular and grass-finished cattle is that they are the ones walking around on that ground providing the natural compost and the hoof activity that builds soil health. So it's the one area of meat eating that you can feel really good about.
And you have some personal experience with buffalo ranching, don't you, Amanda?
My family are very small-scale buffalo ranchers in Central Oregon, which is part of the reason I got buffalo on the brain today.
I love it. Well, thank you, panelists. You guys were great. Amanda Oborne, Vice President of Food and Farms at EcoTrust. And you're also, I would like to also credit you with the Red on Salmon Street in Portland. Can people visit the Red?
Right now you can visit the with an appointment on the Food Hub side. In January, the east side of the campus will open, which is a huge public event space and community teaching kitchen. So we'll put out the word in January, but at that point it will be open to the public and accessible.
And it's a campus for small food entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, it's a 2-city block campus in the east side of Portland that is wholly dedicated to developing the local food system. So there's commissary kitchens and warehousing and cold storage, and now there'll be event space and teaching space, and it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, we'll have to talk about that maybe in January.
Yay!
And Jill Lightner, a food writer, former editor of Edible Seattle, and the author of the new book, Scraps, Peels, and Stems, Recipes and Tips for Rethinking Food Waste, coming out from Skipstone, that's the publisher's name, on October 1st. Thanks for being here, Jill.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
And Fernando Divina, who, in addition to all the other wonderful things I said at the beginning of the show, is also the author of the book Smithsonian's Foods of the Americas, Native Recipes and Traditions, which won the James Beard Foundation Award of Excellence, was a finalist for the IACP Award for Excellence, and an honoree for the Best Culinary History Cookbook in the World. Wow.
Oh, we should do a whole episode on Wapato then.
I know. Oh, yeah, now I see the connection.
Wapato on the mind.
Well, thank you for being here, Fernando.
Happy to be here.
Today's episode was recorded in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in the studios of OPB. Nalene Silva was our audio technician today, and we are always grateful to sound supervisor Stephen Cray. Our editor is Alex Ward, our assistant producer is Izzy Kramer, and our theme music was performed by the incomparable wine importer Kermit Lynch. You can read all about our episodes on the OPB website, and you can also visit our own dedicated website at theforetop.org. If you would like to donate to our James Beard Award-winning show, you can do that at theforetop.org. But if you're not in a place to donate, it still helps if you rate us on iTunes, subscribe to The Foretop on your favorite podcast app, or just tell your friends about us. We love to hear from you if you want to tweet us or post on our Facebook page or Instagram feed. Just let us know what you think about the show. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Nuit blanche, nuit blanche, nuit blanche.